hikers who enter Foxmar Hollow Trailhead in Greenbrier County, WV, often vanish without a sound, leaving only whispers in the pines and red cloth fluttering in the dark yaw. Listening to ASMR 404Found. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you're hearing this, it means you're either lost or you're curious. And honestly, neither one is safe. Around here you know that feeling when the woods go too quiet, not peaceful, but wrong. The kind of silence where the wind holds its breath, and even the bugs seem to hide. That's what it felt like the moment I stepped into Foxmar Hollow. Not the usual forest hush, but something deeper. Like sound itself. Didn't want to stick around. Di was hiking solo in Greenbrier County, West Virginia, a few miles off any marked trail. It was October, and the leaves were that burnt orange color that crunch just right under your boots. I'd been mapping old CCC trails for a side project, mostly forgotten paths from the 1930s, trying to link them with folklore and find the ones that never made it onto official maps. Ghost stories, collapsed shelters, buried rail lines. That kind of thing. Foxmar wasn't on any map, not a single one. But a park ranger back at the station had mentioned it when I asked about strange or abandoned trailheads. He hesitated at first, like he didn't want to say it. Then he muttered something that stuck with me. There's one place left even the locals avoid. Foxmar, don't go looking for it. It finds we. Thought he was messing with me. But then he looked past my shoulder, like something was standing there. Not directly at me, but behind me. I turned fast and trees, long-needled pines, twisted and too tall for the elevation. Nothing else should have let it go. 3 days later, deep in the hollow east of Kate's Mountain, I found an old wooden post, lying face down under a blanket of moss and oak leaves. It was splintered at the base like it had been torn from the ground. I turned it over and saw a single word burned into the surface in uneven block letters. FOX, XMR. The trail started there. No blaze marks, no signs of recent use, just a narrow path that slipped between the trees like a crack in the world. And when I stepped onto it, everything changed. The air felt thicker. I could breathe, but it felt like my lungs had to work harder. The temperature dropped enough for my breath to fog slightly, even though it had been mid-60s, just a few hundred feet back. And then the ringing started. A high tone in both ears, faint but constant, like a tuning fork pressed to bone at first. I thought it was tinnitus from my headphones, but I hadn't been using them. It was something else. The forest around me looked untouched. Pines stretched, tore with heavy needles, so dense they blocked most of the light. The underbrush was sparse but wrong. Pale green moss coated everything, including some of the trees. It felt like stepping into something forgotten by time, something that wanted to be forgotten. Kept walking. The trail wound deeper into the hollow, and the trees got weirder. Some bent at the trunk in impossible curves. Others grew in rings around charred earth. More than once, I passed piles of stones stacked in patterns that felt intentional but ancient. No animal tracks, no broken branches. It was to clean up. About an hour of hiking, I found the first marker. Not a signpost this time, but a small wooden totem nailed to a tree. It had no writing, just a crude face carved into the surface. Wide, hollow eyes, a gaping mouth, and a long series of scratch marks that ran down the torso. I reached out to touch it and felt the wood was damp and warm. Like flesh, I pulled my hand back. Fast, there was no wind, but I heard whispering behind me. Soft, wet, not words exactly. More like breathing that tried to sound like speech I turned no. There I kept going, because I didn't want to admit I was scared, and because I already felt like turning back wouldn't help. Like the way out wasn't where I'd left it. Anymore, it got darker the deeper I went, even though it wasn't late. I checked my GPS, but the screen wouldn't load the satellite map. Just a spinning icon. Compass didn't move either. I tried, marking a waypoint error. Then the screen glitched for a moment and flickered, before going black entirely. Dead. Battery still full. Stopped walking and just listened. Not a single bird. No squirrels. No bugs. Nothing. Just that soft whispering. Sound in the distance and the dull hiss in my ears. Then I saw the second face, not carved this time. It was embedded in a tree, not hanging from it, but inside it, as if the bark had grown around a human face, preserving the features in a horrible grimace. Eyes closed, mouth open like it had screamed and never stopped. I stepped closer and saw teeth, real ones. That's when I realized I wasn't in any ordinary wood's eye. Looked up and saw more of them. Faces, not all human. Some distorted, others elongated. One had a third eye carved vertically into the forehead. Another was just a flat mask with no mouth, only a swirling pattern where lips should be. One was part of a tree I should have run then. I should have turned and sprinted back the way I came, but my legs felt heavy. My mind kept telling me I had to know more, had to see where this trail ended. So I walked. There was a sound behind me like twigs snapping, not a branch breaking underfoot, but like knuckles being cracked one by one. Then, breathing close, I didn't turn. I didn't want to know what it was. My feet kept moving on there. Only eventually, the trail opened into a clearing. Dead center was an old stone circle, maybe 10 feet across, with moss-covered stones that looked like they'd been dragged here from somewhere else. In the center stood a single wooden post with a length of faded red cloth tied around it. Fluttering even though there was no wind, I stepped into the circle and everything went silent. Not just quiet. No sound. Not even the whispering. Then I heard a voice, not with my ears, but inside my skull. Clear, cold, it said. You're late. And then the sun went out. I don't mean it got dark. I mean the sun was gone. Just like that. 1 second there was dim orange light filtering through the trees, and the next there was black. Like a switch flipped. I stumbled back from the stone circle, but the shadows didn't shift. No stars, no moon, just this absolute pitch where the woods should be. I held my breath, and could still feel the cold, damp earth under my boots. But I couldn't see my hands, couldn't see the trees. Only that post in the center remained visible, dimly lit like it was glowing from within. The voice came again. This time it was closer, clearer, still inside my head, like memory layered over real sound. You crossed the boundary. You belong to the hollow. Now, I turned in a slow circle and saw something move at the edge of where the light touched. Not one thing, several figures, dozens of them, just shapes at first. But the longer I stared, the more they took on features, some tall, others crawling, some with limbs too long. One was dragging itself across the ground with broken elbows. Another hung upside down from an invisible branch. Twitching guy wasn't frozen with fear. That would have been easier. I was aware, too aware. I could hear the soil shift beneath my boots, feel the fabric of my backpack press into my shoulders. My heartbeat pulsed behind my eyes. Then they stepped forward. I backed up fast and hit the post in the center. My shoulder cracked against it, and when I touched it with my palm, something changed again. The figures stopped, every one of them. Like a line had been drawn. The post vibrated under my hand, like a heartbeat, but slower. It wasn't wood, not really. It felt organic, breathing. I stepped around it and looked closer at the cloth tied to the top. It was old but not rotted, not fabric I could recognize. The pattern on it was wrong. When I turned around again, the figures were Ganand. The light returned, gray, thin light, like pre-dawn fog. I was still in the same clearing, but the forest looked different, older. Trees were wider, the moss thicker. That stone circle hadn't been built recently. The edges of the rocks were worn smooth by what looked like centuries of wind that didn't exist. Pulled out my phone again. Still dead. I checked my compass. It spun slowly in one direction, stopped, then reversed. I tried to follow the trail back the way I came, but it wasn't there. No footprints. No clear path, just wall-to-wall. Penai had rope markers with me, orange ties meant for mapping. I tied one around a branch and walked in a slow, deliberate direction. When I looked back 5 minutes later, the marker was gone. Not fallen, gone. Like the tree had never been touched. Then the whispers returned. This time closer, clearer. They weren't speaking a language I knew, but I felt the meaning, urgency, warning, maybe even hunger. I saw movement in the corner of my vision and turned fast. There was a woman watching me from behind a tree. She wore a long faded dress, the fabric thin and stained. Her skin was pale, stretched tight over her bones. Her eyes were black, not like dark irises, but like the sockets were hollow. Look, she didn't blink. I stepped back, and she mirrored me. Then she smiled. Her jaw opened too wide, wider than it should. Her mouth cracked upward into her cheeks, exposing more than teeth. There were rows, layered like shark jaws. She whispered something without sound and took one step. Toward me ran the woods, blurred past me, but the trees didn't seem to change. It felt like I was sprinting in a loop. I passed the same twisted trunk 3 times. I stopped and screamed, not out of fear, but out of frustration. Then I heard a second voice. This one came from behind my ear. Not inside my head this time, but breath warm and really awaking them. Up I turned, and nothing was there that when I noticed the ground beneath my boots had changed. It wasn't soil anymore. It was softer, almost sponge-like. I knelt and brushed the surface. It peeled slightly, like skin. Beneath it were thin white roots that pulsed slowly. Something moved beneath my palm, and I jerked away. I stood up and looked around. Then I saw the triad. Wasn't the biggest or the thickest, but it was different. Its bark wasn't rough. It was smooth, almost human in color. At shoulder height was a mouth, sewn shut with fine black thread. Beneath that, 2 nostrils. No, as it was breathing, the tree exhaled, and the air smelled like blood dye, backed away. But the forest had gotten closer. That's the only way I can describe it. The trunks were tighter, the light dimmer, like the woods didn't want me to leave. Then I heard music, a lullaby, old, warbled, like it came from a phonograph playing underwater. It led me to a cabin. I don't know how I hadn't seen it before. It was just there, tucked between 2 massive trees. The roofs sagged inward. The windows were shattered, but the door stood open. The music was coming from inside. I stepped onto the porch, and the boards didn't creak. They pulsed. Inside was dust, layers of it, on the shelves, on the table, on the bones. There were bones scattered across the floor in shapes I didn't recognize. Not random, not tossed. Arranged carefully, geometric patterns that hummed faintly in the air. I couldn't tell if they were human. The music played from an old record player in the corner. No power, no chord, just spinning. Next to it sat a journal. I opened it slowly. The pages were stained but legible. They all say the same thing. It starts with 1. The hollow only needs 1 to call the rest. The mouth in the trees opens when the name is said. Then it said the name. I didn't want to say it. I didn't even want to read it in my mind. But the page moved, flipped itself, and I saw the letters etched deep. Veldenoth. Word echoed in my head like it had been waiting for years to be spitted outside. The forest shifted, the trees leaned in, the sky went dark again. This time, no voice spoke, just breathing everywhere. The walls of the cabin groaned. The bones on the floor began to tremble. I ran out the door and into the woods, pushing through branches that felt like fingers. The forest, always alive now, watching, listening, moving, and I had spoken its name. The forest didn't feel like a place anymore. It felt like a body, like I was inside something ancient and half awake, and my footsteps were rattling nerves it hadn't used in centuries. I kept moving forward because I didn't think going back would help. I couldn't even tell which way I'd come. The trees pulsed with faint red veins under the bark, like blood moving through capillaries. Their branches shifted without wind. The deeper I went, the more the forest seemed to fold in on itself. Trails looped back. The same moss-covered rock appeared 5 times. I'd walk in one direction and find the same journal I left inside the cabin, now lying open in the dirt. I picked it up and flipped to the last page. You said her name. You belong now. Your voice is part of the forest. You are no longer silent. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. Human, 2 sets. From behind, May turned round. Saw Thema, man and a woman, both pale, both barefoot. Their eyes were blank and stretched too wide. The woman had a crooked smile that never moved. The man's mouth hung open as if unhinged, but no sound came out. They walked with slow, synchronized steps like marionettes, sharing one mind behind them. More shapes emerged. Dozens, some crawling, some dragging what looked like ropes of flesh. Behind them, one was missing its lower half, but floated forward anyway. Another had no face at all, and all of them were looking at me, not with eyes, with awareness. Like I was the last word of a forgotten prayer, and they were all finally ready to finish speaking. Ran again this time. I didn't care which way. I just wanted to move. Branches whipped against my face. Roots clawed at my ankles. I kept thinking of the word Veldina. I could feel it vibrating in my teeth, like it had a frequency only I could hear. Nound. Then I saw the opening. It wasn't an exit, not a clearing, not a trailhead. It was a hole in the ground wide. Black, breathing. It pulsed like a throat. The air around it was thick with heat and the sound of whispers coming from below. I should have turned and gone the other way, but the footsteps behind me had multiplied. I could feel breath on my neck that didn't belong to me. I heard a voice hiss the word Agenveldane. Stepped to the edge on. Something pulled me under, not physically, mentally. I fell without moving. My vision turned inside out. I saw memories that weren't mine. A girl screaming as trees grew through her ribs. A man carving faces into bark with his own fingernails. A priest tying red cloths around posts and crying as he prayed to something. He couldn't see then I was standing in a different place, or maybe the same place, but layered deeper. The trees here were dead, bleached white and twisting toward a ceiling of bones. There was no sky, no sound, only a structure in the center that looked like an altar built from the bodies of those who had entered before. Their faces still screamed at the base of the altar. Something sat on a throne of roots. It had no face, just a void. Its fingers were branches. Its breath was fog. It reached toward me and I couldn't move. The thing that had once been Veldina spoke without speaking, poured into me. Its thoughts weren't sentences, they were urges. It wanted out. It wanted form. It wanted skin. It had been waiting for a voice to call it, for a name to echo loud enough. For belief, and I had given it all. Thrym. My body shook. My teeth chattered. Not from cold, but from the sound that wasn't sound. It was pouring into my head like ink flooding a glass. Then I screamed, and the scream didn't stop. I opened my eyes. I was back in the forest, lying in the dirt at the base of the old post with the red cloth. The stone circle was gone. The trees were normal. Birds were chirping again. The sun was out. My pack was beside me. untouched. My phone was on. Battery full. For a second I thought I'd dreamed it, till I saw the bark on the tree behind me. There was a face carved into it, mine mouth open. Screaming, I got up and started walking. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I walked for hours until I hit pavement. I flagged down a trucker near the highway and didn't say a word when he asked if I was all right. I just nodded and asked where the nearest town was. Didn't go back to my car. I didn't go back for my maps. I took a bus to a different state and stayed in motels for weeks, sleeping with the lights on, the mirror covered, and headphones playing static so I wouldn't hear the whispers. But they followed me. They don't speak anymore. They command. Sometimes I find red cloth tied to trees in places I've never been tried, warning people, posting online, talking to rangers. But every time I describe Foxmar Hollow, no one knows it. No maps show it. No locals remember. But if you're still hearing, MIT means it found you too, and now that you know it's Nemit knows you're. If you're reading this, it means the trail found you to you. Don't find Dagger Creek Trailhead by mistake. That's what they always say around Rogue River country. Locals won't name it. Some pretend it doesn't exist. But there's always someone who thinks they're clever, chasing the rumors. The story about the choir that disappeared in the 1970s. 22 high school kids on a summer trip, all vanished somewhere between mile 2 and mile 3. No body, no gear, not even footprints. I wasn't chasing the ghost story. Not really. I was just following the logging maps from the 1960s, looking for a forgotten service route that had once linked the original Firewatch stations near the Siskiyou Divide. That's how I found the clearing. That's how I saw the sign. It was nailed to an old cedar post, warped and barely standing. But the words were clear: Dagger Creek Trailhead. The moment I stepped onto the path, something shifted. The sounds of the forest behind me cut off like someone had closed a door. No birds, no wind. Just the creak of trees that felt too close together and the damp crunch of moss under my boots. I remember pausing and thinking it was just the elevation messing with my hearing. But it wasn't. He walked for 20 minutes before I realized the trail markers weren't right. Every carved blaze was identical, but deeper than standard trail. Signs, not just etched but gouged, with thin vertical cuts running down the center like tally marks. I passed 7 of them before I stopped counting. There were no birds, no bugs. Even the air felt heavier, like it wasn't meant to be. Breath. Then I found the sheet music kit was wedged under a rock, dry and intact. Faded at the edges, but untouched by the weather. The title read him for the Hollow God. I felt cold all over. Not scared. Not yet. Just suddenly aware that the woods around me had shifted again. The trees were taller now, bent slightly toward the trail. Every trunk was marked with that same deep vertical gouge. The lines weren't random. They were forming shapes. Sai took a picture. The file was corrupted when I checked it. Latai kept walking, because part of me didn't want to stop. Something was pulling me forward, like pressure behind my ribs, like the trail was breathing in, and I was caught in its lungs. Then came the singing. It wasn't close, not at first, just a low hum. Chorale, young voices, soft, rhythmic, echoing off the trees like wind through hollow wood. I froze, strained to hear if it was real. And the moment I focused on it, it stopped. I turned around, and the trail was gone. No path behind me, just trees, bark stripped in vertical lines, branches angled toward me like fingers pointing. I panicked and started moving faster, deeper, hoping the trail would reconnect or I'd find a landmark. Anything I passed, a rusted piece of what looked like an old harmonica, half buried in a bed of black moss. When I picked it up, the humming started again, louder this time, closer. Still no lyrics, just tones, pure, human, but wrong. Like kids singing in a language made of breath. I dropped the harmonica and ran that S. When I saw the first child, she was standing in the center of the path, pale, hair matted, dressed in what looked like a 1970s school uniform. Her lips were moving, but no sound came out. Her eyes weren't blank or angry. They looked tired. When I blinked, she was gone. I kept walking, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't stop. My feet hurt, my legs burned, but my steps didn't slow. The trail sloped downward now, too fast, too steep, but my body kept going. My watch beeped once and froze at 3:17 p.m. That was 3 days ago, maybe longer. I don't know anymore. My phone died on the first night. My water's gone. My food was gone by the second. But I'm not starving. I'm not thirsty. I should be, but the singing keeps me awake, keeps me moving. I wake up and realize I've been walking in my sleep. My legs keep carrying me forward. The trail never ends. It only shifts. The air smells like old paper and salt. My fingers are always sticky, like I've been touching tree sap. But there are no cuts. I passed a mirror nailed to a tree. It was fogged and cracked. But when I looked into it, I saw 22 faces behind me. Children, all singing, all with their mouths sewn shut, and when I turned around, nothing was there. I stopped trying to track the hours. When the sun does shine here, it doesn't move. It hangs, stuck just above the treetops, glowing through a haze that makes shadows twist in the wrong direction. And when it disappears, it doesn't fade. It just shuts off, like someone killed the sky. The air tastes metallic now, like old pennies and wet iron. I haven't eaten in what should be days. I don't feel hungry anymore. My stomach feels hollow but calm, like it's been scooped clean sometimes. When I blink, I see the girl again. She's always ahead of me, just off the path, just between the trees, standing still, mouth open. Her jaw doesn't move, but I hear humming when she's near. Her skin is thin, stretched tight over bone, and her hair sways as if pulled by something beneath her feet. You've tried yelling, no echo, no reaction, just that humming. I've started keeping track of the things that shouldn't be here. I don't know why. Maybe it helps me stay human. Here's what I've seen so far. A desk, half sunk into the ground, still had pencils and a graded spelling test on it. a choir robe nailed to a tree, but the arms were still moving inside it. A mouth carved into a boulder, not painted, grown into the stone. It was breathing a bench in the woods with carved vanishes and fresh gum stuck under it, like it had just been used, a boot print larger than any human foot I've ever seen. Each toe separate, clawed, like a hand had walked instead of a foot. These are not hallucinations. They're too consistent, too detailed. Hallucinations don't cast shadows, don't breathe in sync with the wind in what felt like my fourth day. I reached what I thought was a clearing. It looked like a field at first, surrounded by dead firs. The trees had no bark, stripped clean. In the center was a pit, shallow, maybe 12 feet across, lined with stones stacked in a spiral. I stepped toward it and felt something change in my chest. My heartbeat slowed. I wasn't panicking. I felt calm, numb. Then I heard them sing again, not humming this time, singing a soft harmony of young voices, low and even. The words were nonsense, but the melody was sweet, too sweet. The kind of tune you'd hear in a church if that church had been buried for decades and remembered only by ghosts. I stepped closer to the pit inside. It were shoes, only shoes, dozens of them, all small, kids' sizes, most of them old. They were arranged in a spiral too, just like the stones. At the center was a folded piece of sheet music, and a lunchbox covered in hand-drawn stickers. I picked up the paper and felt something cold wrap around my fingers. Not wind, not air. It was like a Hondi dropped the paper and the singing stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It felt intentional, punishing. Then I heard something breathing behind me, slow, deep, wet. I turned, and there was no one there. But the tree line had moved. The trees were closer, so close I could see the vertical cuts in the bark twitching slightly, like wounds trying to breathe. Left the pit behind and followed the trail again. But it wasn't a trail anymore. It was narrower, root-choked, and darker. I lit my headlamp, but the light didn't travel far. It bent like fog was pushing it down every few yards. I saw shapes half hidden between the trees. Children, frozen, like snapshots stuck in time. One was mid-step, arms out, mouth open in a scream. Another was curled beneath the roots, hugging her knees. I saw two hands clutching a branch 20 feet up, with no body attached. None of them moved, but all of them watched. I stopped when I saw the bus. It was resting in a slope of mud and needles, its wheels buried, windows shattered. The paint was faded yellow with the school district's name half scraped off. I climbed inside. The seats were still there. Each one had names carved into the backs. First names, some with hearts, some with music notes. The rear windows were stained with something brown-red. I tried not to look at it long. The very back row, there was a cassette player duct-taped to the seat. It had a single tape inside labeled rehearsal. Mr. Kelman, in fading blue ink. I pressed play at first. Nothing, then static. Then the sound of children tuning their voices. One boy laughed nervously. A girl said she forgot her lyrics. And then a man's voice said softly, Let's try again, one more time. For the hollow and then the singing started. It wasn't music. Not anymore. It was screaming high. Layered screams played backward, mixed with something low and inhuman underneath. I dropped the player and ran from the bus. Behind me I heard the static continue to play, louder and louder, until it sounded like it was coming from the forest itself. Didn't stop until I reached the lake. It was sudden, still, perfectly round, like it had been scooped out of the earth with a spoon. The water was black, too black. It didn't reflect the sky. It didn't reflect me. The far side of the lake was a stage on, actual stage. Raised wooden planks, empty music stands, a conductor's podium. The whole thing was built into the woods, like someone had planned a concert for no one. And then the lights turned on, not fire, not torches, real stage lights, bright white beams. Cutting across the dark trees I heard footsteps, lots of them. I crouched behind a stump and watched as the children filed in, 24, all in uniform, robes torn, hair wet, skin pale and stretched. Their mouths didn't move, but the sound rose anyway. That same impossible melody. Then the conductor appeared. He wasn't human anymore. His robe dragged behind him like it was soaked in oil. His face was long, split down the center, eyes flickering in and out like candles. His hands moved slowly, guiding the choir, and every time he raised his baton, something behind the trees responded, not with sound. With movement, the forest leaned forward. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Then one of the children turned and looked straight at MIT. Was the girl. She stepped down from the stage. 1 step, 2. Her bare feet didn't make a sound. Her eyes didn't blink. She walked straight to the edge of the lake and pointed at the water ant. I saw myself reflected, not standing behind the stumps, standing on the stage, wearing a robe, mouth sewn, shut arms at my side. I turned to run, and the trees closed behind me like a trap snapping shut. The trees wouldn't let me leave, no matter how far I ran. The trail coiled tighter, bending into itself like a throat closing. I screamed until my voice cracked, but the forest swallowed it whole. No echo, just that wet hush, like something was breathing under the moss. I ripped my shirt, trying to climb a ledge. I broke my hand punching a tree when the path looped again. My fingers bled, but the dirt sucked the blood down like it was thirsty. Wasn't alone anymore. I started to feel them, walking beside me, not touching, not speaking, but present. The children, the lost choir. I couldn't see them directly, but their presence pressed into the world like a thumbprint in wet paper. Sometimes I heard soft shuffling behind me. Sometimes I felt my pack get tugged gently by invisible fingers. At one point I woke up standing, not lying down. Standing, my boots were soaked. My arms were limp at my sides. My mouth was open. I felt something crusted around my lips, or bloodied, been singing in my sleep. That's when I saw the second stage. This one was built into the roots of the forest, put itself. Twisted branches formed the backdrop. Bones shaped the rises. 1,000 candles floated mid-air, illuminating the scene without smoke or heat. The conductor stood in the center, baton raised. His face no longer had features, only stretched skin pulled over a black. Empty tremors. I stepped forward. The choir turned to face me. Their mouths were still sewn shut, but the sound coming from them vibrated the air. My skin prickled. My teeth ached. Ty looked down and saw that I was standing on sheet music. Endless pages of it, scattered across the dirt, climbing the trees, drifting in the windless air. Each page had my name written across the top in looping, handwritten ink. Each note was wrong, off-key, inverted, like the melody had been cursed. I felt the urge to join them. It wasn't fear that held me back. It was knowing that if I stepped forward, I'd never step back again. I'd be just another verse in the song, another echo in the trees, but something kept pulling then. The conductor raised one hand, and the forest around me shuddered. The bark on the trees peeled open mouths. Hundreds, all singing, some silent, some screaming, others whispering ancient hymns with no beginning or end. The ground cracked. The roots curled upward like fingers. Something massive moved beneath the forest floor shape. A presence too big for eyes to process. Veldenoth. Name again. Not from the choir, from the trees themselves, from the roots, from the song. Veldenai remembered that name from an old church folk tale I read once, years ago. A Pacific Northwest myth, a being believed to have been sealed in the earth by hymns, bound by melody, kept silent by choirs of innocence. The song was ever broken. If the choir ever stopped, it would walk hand. Now the children were gone. They had finished their song. The conductor dropped his baton. Everything stopped. Silence hit the forest like a thunderclappy. Collapsed to my knees, chest heaving, ears ringing. Bit the candles, snuffed out one by one. The trees groaned, leaning inward like they were being pulled into the earth. Then the pit opened. It didn't look like a hole. It looked like the sky had been reversed, dragged downward, folded into a pyramid. I heard them, all of them. Not just the children, all the hikers, all the campers, all the lost voices from the past 50 years, layered, twisting, merging into one endless cry. They weren't singing anymore, they were begging, turned to run. And finally, the trail opened. I don't know how long I ran. My feet bled. My knees buckled, but I ran until I saw the sign again. Dagger Creek Trailhead. I burst out onto the Forest Service road, collapsing in the gravel. I sobbed until my voice gave out. My arms shook. My throat was. Rosamond found me 6 hours later. A fire crew doing survey work. I don't remember much. Just the sound of one of them saying my name, saying I'd been missing for 10 days. 10 they said I'd posted to my GPS once. A photo of a warped tree and nothing else. No coordinates, number, message. I never took that photo. I was hospitalized for dehydration and nerve damage. I didn't tell them the full story. Just that I'd gotten lost and fallen. They gave me therapy, medication, group counseling. None of it worked because I still hear the singing late at night when the room is quiet. I hear it again faint, but closer each time. Sometimes I wake up with sheet music on the floor around my bed once. I found red thread in my mouth, and last week, my neighbor's kid vanished during a hike north of Medford. His family found one thing left behind on a branch near a dry creek bed. Folded paper with a single title scrawled in red ink for the hollow Godi. No, it's starting again. I know the trail still waits you. Don't find Dagger Creek, it finds you.